Kia ora everyone, my name's Zach. I love rugby. Welcome back to Hakatime Rugby. Guys, I'm still coming down from the highs of that weekend. Those quarterfinal matches were unbelievable. I mentioned it in my review of the Springboks France game that I thought game management, rotation management in terms of the bench players, it was such an important factor, and it was one of the keys to victory. I'm going to cover both games here, guys. I'm going to cover the Springboks in France and how they were able to limit the impact of the yellow card to Eben Etzebeth. I'm also going to run through the All Blacks game and how they were able to limit the impact of 2 yellow cards. And that's huge because we have seen in this World Cup cycle that many games for the All Blacks in particular around their discipline has cost them massive matches. And there was some concerns when you start to see yellow cards that maybe we're heading down the same path. But I just feel that the way that both teams really planned and managed those periods was huge in the context of both this Rugby World Cup, but in the context of winning those one-off quarterfinal matches. You have to know what you're doing when it comes to this level of rugby, guys. And I just thought both of these teams played it perfectly. Let's kick things off with France, South Africa. So here are the selections. Most of these names, particularly in the forward pack, we know Dwayne Vermeulen was somewhat of a surprise. Jasper Wiese has been there or thereabouts. But, ultimately a settled forward pack where there are changes are in the back. So if we just take a little bit of a deeper dive there, and we covered this off in the preview to this match, that there's really 2 styles of backlines at play here. You've got the combination of Reinach, Libbok, and Willemse, that are, younger guys, great running game, electric, full of energy, high work rate, great under the high ball. Like these 3 guys play a very specific style, and it's a style that South Africa have been building in this World Cup cycle a lot more recently in the last year or two, where they're able to mix both that, what we know is a fantastic power set piece game in the forwards with electric backs, exciting backs, and sometimes no look kicks in the backs, and then translate that to who they've got on the bench here, the 5-3 split. Faf de Klerk, Andre Pollard, Willie Leroux. We've seen them in 2019. We've seen these guys over the years just be able to manage games at the death and close out big games when it matters. That happened in the World Cup final last year, right? These 3 guys, very, very experienced. So it is clear here, and we talk about bomb squads from a 7-1, 6-2. I actually described this as a mini bomb squad in my preview because it enables you just to change the look of the game. You go from all-out attack, an ability to score points quickly, to an ability to close out the game with high IQ rugby. And that's what the Springboks had set up for, and that's going to be really, really important as we look at how this game played out. Eben Etzebeth gets a card at the 39th minute. Now, at that point, it's 1919. It is tit for tat. It's try for try. And what we're seeing from France is a lot of kicking, a lot of chasing. We're seeing the same from the Springboks, albeit the Springboks are having slightly more success under the high ball. At this point, just before halftime, right, it's 1919. It felt like it's sort of evenly shared in terms of the, who was on top. But this is a massive moment. I'll say one thing about a yellow card in the 39th minute and probably anywhere sort of close to halftime. If you're going to get a yellow card, that is the best possible time to get it, because it means the players just have to dig in for a couple more minutes before taking a rest. And, you've got a relatively well-rested team that'll be able to defend for that remaining, in this case, 9 minutes after halftime, having that halftime break. So Eben Etzebeth, the game is in the balance at this point, and he goes off with a yellow card. Now, at halftime, Ramos scores the penalty, and France are slightly ahead, 22 points to 19. But as I say, a halftime break is coming, and all players get a rest. Now, the 44th minute is when we start to see the rotations come in. So, Ajay Snyman, Faf de Klerk, and Andre Pollard. So, in my view, this is sort of a view from Jacques Ninaba that they probably want to start managing the remainder of the minutes. There's still 5 minutes there with Etzebeth. Obviously, they're off. So it's an opportunity for experienced heads like Faf de Klerk and Andre Pollard just to play a style of game that'll mean that they can chew up some of these minutes. And they did it very, very well. There was no other exposure from the yellow card. Obviously, we move forward here now 2 minutes later, and Dion Fourie comes on. Dion Fourie, as this sort of player that can slot into either hooker or into the loose trio, gives you so many fantastic options. So he comes in at this point, obviously is able to give some defensive assistance here, and that's needed because, there's still 3 minutes of time left for Eben Etzebeth. Get to the 49th minute and Eben Etzebeth comes back on. It's a full complement of players and the game is firmly in the balance. But the exposure, the issues around the yellow card have been largely mitigated. Part of it is due to smart rotations early after halftime. Part of it is the timing. Purely the timing. And one factor to remember is that Eben Etzebeth at this point in time is well rested with 30 minutes left in the game. That's an important point to remember. Now we move forward and a couple of big changes. Oxenchair and Kwagga Smith. Now both of these guys had huge impacts on the game. Oxenchair really started to dominate his opposition in terms of the scrums, and Kwagga Smith was just electric all over the ball and earned a number of penalties. France do pull away at this point, so they were able to get a penalty goal, 25 points to 19. Willie Leroux also comes on at this point, and we're starting to see a shift a little bit in terms of how the Springboks are playing. We're seeing a lot more game management from the backs, and we're seeing a lot more scrum domination. And most of you will remember the moment that it was an interesting moment where it was Damian Willemse took the mark. He called for the scrum. I did hear Rassie Erasmus talking about why they did that. And he says that there's a habit of players just kind of loitering in the middle of the field and not really engaging, a lot of the big forwards. So Rassie's plan, Jacques Nienaber's plan, was to get the forwards of the French to engage so that when it gets to this kind of part of the game, you bring on Oxenchair, his impact is greater. Because those forwards have actually had to work a little bit throughout the game. If they just kind of sit in between this kicking drill, and there's no real sort of, tiring factor for them. But this is where it starts to pay dividends. Oxenchair getting on top, Kwagga Smith having a huge impact. Moving forward, this is where we start to get a bit, let's say, maybe there's a little bit of gamesmanship here, but Peter Steph du Toit goes off with an HI on the 60th minute, right? On comes Vincent Koch to cover, that position there. Dwayne Vermeulen is forced to come back on. So it's very much, a different makeup to this forward pack. We're seeing names sort of come in and out. But all of these boxes in yellow highlight that, where the changes have been. You can start to see there's been rotation in the forwards, that a lot of these players have had a lot of minutes off. Etzebeth, obviously, with the yellow card. So these guys are relatively fresh at this point, right? Dwayne Vermeulen has been off for 10 minutes at this point, so 20 minutes at this point. So, we're really starting to see the smartness come into play in terms of how you're managing the rotations. If we go forward, 67th minute, right? It's a try to the Springboks. They take the lead. Now they're 1 point in front, and the player who's played the most minutes here, Bongi Mbonambi. So we go forward. It's a massive bomb from Andre Pollard, showing his experience. This is the reason why he was put in the substitutes, and this is the reason why now that you've got Faf de Klerk, Andre Pollard, Willie Leroux, you've really got a specific style that you can play to close out and strangle this game. Moving forward, the benefit of having Dion Fourie is you can move him from back row to hooker. And now that he has been moved, Peter Steph du Toit passes his HIA, Bongi Mbonambi goes off with an HIA. You're in a situation where you've got 6 minutes to defend for your lives, and you've got a forward pack that have all been rested. That is massive in the context of this game and in the context of what is needed to close out these huge games. And it's played to perfection by Jacques Nienaber, obviously Rassie part of that plan. But when I actually reflected on this game and I saw the decisions that were made at various points, and I saw the fact that all of these forwards have had time off the park, that there were specific investments, let's say, that were made with the likes of Damian Willemse calling for the scrum to help those forwards engage, to tire their forwards out a little bit, it all started to come together as a genius plan. Now, to France's credit, the game is still close, right? And they've got an opportunity to win it. But in the end, unable to do it. 81st minute, Faf de Klerk gets the steal. Although he did kick the ball away. That was a bit of a head scratcher. He kicked the ball away on the 79th minute. But he was also the person that stole it and ultimately closed out the game. So let me know what you guys thought about that whole process, that whole sequence. Because, I just look at the changes that were made. And if you think about who you want on the field at the end of the game when it matters, I like the look of that team, right? So I think the Springboks played it perfectly. That's my personal view. We're going to move on to the All Blacks next. This is the forward pack that we all wanted to see. It's been building for some time. A lot of these players have sort of had spurts in terms of their availability. Frizzell obviously injured. And the All Blacks have really missed the impact of this squad on the track. I do think in the lead up, having a couple of lighter games, let's say in the pool play, meant they could really rest, recuperate, get ready, and then obviously translate to Ireland, who have been playing all of their players in the lead up to this. It just felt like we were the more well-rested team. A lot was made around being game ready, game hardened, but I just thought it's far more beneficial to have a rested squad for these big one-off games, and they needed it for the style of play that they were looking to play. So just in terms of the selections off the bench. Now, I've highlighted 3 big players here. Dane Coles, Sam Whitelock, Anton Leonard-Brown. Together they share 304 caps, right? So a huge amount of experience there coming off the bench. Obviously, if you do get caught into a defensive grind like they did here, then you really want those types of players available to you, when it really requires the tough stuff. They've been there, they've done it, they've seen it, they've got the t-shirt, and that's the experience that you really want influencing the wider squad during those difficult moments. And then you add in the inexperience of Tamaiti Williams, Fletcher Newell, relatively new to the setup, but certainly earned their spot here. Williams and Newell, and Fozzie spoke about this with a number of other selections. They were favoured purely for their defensive work rate and effort that they put in, and Fozzie just felt that was something that would be needed in this game. So Tamaiti Williams, Fletcher Newell, a lot made about Finlay Christie and whether or not he should be selected. Fozzie said it again. His defensive work is slightly better than Cam Roigard's, and for that reason, he is going with Finlay Christie. So, well, I might have disagreed with it. I completely understand the logic, and in the end, you'd have to say, yeah, it was probably the right call, even though he didn't get any game time. But that was just the nature of the tempo of the game. It felt like there was a constant arm wrestle, that the All Blacks were winning that arm wrestle, and that really we were managing the tempo, and there was no point in changing the team. We'll get to how it all played out now. Aaron Smith gets a yellow card, 36th minute. Now, if you look at the Eben Etzebeth issue, it was 39th minute, so a lot shorter window before halftime to have to manage. This is sort of in that danger zone of 4, 5, 6 minutes before halftime. You got defenses are tiring. There's a big work rate needed here in order to keep them out. All Blacks unable to do that. And in the end, it was more the defensive system, namely that gap that was left by where Aaron Smith would normally defend. Jamison Gibson Park, very clever, running down that channel, exposing that defensive weakness with Smith being missing and scoring the try. Now, at this point in the game, I thought the All Blacks were dominant for 30 minutes of that 40 minutes in the first half. Really looked good. Ireland only were dominant, I thought, for about 10 minutes. But with that, the game's almost even. And Aaron Smith is still in the bin. So I would have thought Ireland were quite happy at halftime with that outcome, given, a lot of the running was against them, and the All Blacks were really just managing this game, grinding it out, and were probably on top for a higher percentage of that half. Now, we do get a change in the 58th minute. So Barrett moves into 6, Scott Barrett. Frizzell comes off, and on comes Sam Whitelock. So you're starting to see the experience come in. With 22 minutes, that's a really good shift for someone, of the age and the experience of Whitelock. Great time to interject him into the game. Okay, and then we get, just a crazy sequence of play. So Ireland get a penalty. They kick into the corner, and they're setting up for the line-out. A number of changes are made. Tamaiti Williams comes on and Fletcher Newell comes on, and ALB is introduced at that point as well. So the thinking at that point is, okay, we need to start this defensive stand, rotate. Defense is starting to tire. Obviously, De Groot and Lomax had a big shift in that area. And I thought as well, Whanganuku, a few little defensive lapses, gave away a couple of penalties. Really good time to swap him out. You also want that high work rate, high energy, solid defender in ALB. So bringing him on at this point was really, really smart. All of that being said, the line-out maul was a disaster. So Cody Taylor infringes, pulls down the maul, and gets the yellow card and gives up the penalty try. That's the worst-case situation, right, at that point. So you've got to now defend for 10 minutes in the 60th minute when the game that close. Just, it requires a real locked-in focus at this point. I suppose the benefit you do have is that Tamaiti Williams, Newell, and ALB are on fresh, so they're going to be required to really step up their work rate. As we go forward to the 64th minute, and, it starts to get interesting here in that, it's the first scrum during the yellow card period, so Dane Coles comes on, And there's another sort of reshuffle. Brodie Retallick comes off at that point. So you're still down to a 7-man forward pack. Brodie Retallick comes on. Good time to include Dean Coles here. Obviously 1 minute after the yellow card. So still a lot of work to do for the All Blacks here. Then come the 74th minute. There are changes made again. So Brodie Retallick is brought back on. Dalton Papali'i comes off. So, the yellow card period finishes, and rather than replace Coles, who came in as cover, they keep Coles on, who's obviously relatively fresh. They take off, they fill that spot with Retallick coming back on there into lock, and Dalton Papali'i comes on for Sam Cane. And Sam Cane had just a huge game. Absolutely immense. The best game he's played in black. It needed a captain's knock, and it got it. And at this point, you look at the makeup of this forward pack, and this is the team that is going to make their defensive stand and try and win this and close out this game. And I just look at the experience, right? So Retallick, Whitelock, Coles, Barrett, Severe, who's just been Superman throughout this game. They had to really dig in, but between those players and including ALB, you've got a shot at it because you've got guys that have been there before and are ready to dig their heels in and go for it. And I just think in the end, the All Blacks had the right people on at the right time. They had to weather the storm around the yellow cards, and they did that fantastically. I'm going to do another video, guys, breaking down that 37-phase defensive effort. There's so many little micro battles in there that I thought it's really worth touching on. But I thought it was interesting if we look at game management, and we look at game management at the highest level in the biggest one-off games, the All Blacks and the Springboks played it to perfection. A lot more content coming up from me, guys. There's a lot more analysis that I've seen, little moments that I want to cover off with you in the lead up to the big matches. I've also identified, Springbok fans, you might want to hang around for my review of the All Blacks game because there's a couple of things I've noticed in it which are certainly going to come up if those two teams meet in the final. No one's getting ahead of themselves. There's a semi-final to get through, and two teams that equally want to win that have history of beating. Certainly Argentina has history of beating the All Blacks. But if the All Blacks do progress, I've identified some things that I'm certain they're going to try and do to win favour in their advantage. I'll leave it there, guys. Have a great day, and I will see you soon.